Most people think traditional English food was bland, boring, and beige, but that's only what survived. These are the dishes that didn't. Pies built for fasting, cakes made from dripping, soups twisted into jokes, and names that promised one thing and delivered another. This is the lost side of English country cooking. And once you hear it, the stereotype doesn't survive. 1. Jugged hare. Early morning, a hare comes in from the field, still warm, and nothing gets wasted. It's jointed, dropped into a covered pot, and left to simmer low and slow in red wine and stock until the meat turns almost spoon tender. The old school detail is the sauce. Traditionally, you keep a little of the hare's blood back and stir it in right at the end to thicken and deepen the gravy, almost like the French civet. Jugged basically means it was cooked sealed up in a lidded container. Originally, an earthenware jug stood in a pan of water. 2. Pigeon pie. Same kind of countryside bird and beast cooking, just a different finish. A pigeon pie starts with proper dark little birds, usually wood pigeon, breasted or jointed, then tucked into a deep dish with smoky bacon and onion. The idea is simple: keep the filling moist and let the pastry do the sealing. Some versions enrich the gravy with wine or mushrooms, but the backbone is always meat, plus a good, savoury liquor. And it's not some modern chef twist either. Mrs. Beeton's pigeon pie layers pigeon with beef and ham, adds hard-boiled eggs, then pours in stock before baking. 3. Fidget pie. If that last pie was for the shooting crowd, this one feels built for the fields. Fidget pie sounds like it should be a dessert. Then you cut into it and it's pork, onions and sharp cooking apples all tangled together. Most versions are linked to Shropshire and the wider Midlands, and the "why is it called that" part is genuinely murky. Even recipe writers admit nobody knows for sure. The filling is usually gammon or bacon with apple, often potato, and a splash of cider for moisture. It's basically meat, veg and fruit in one bake, a proper harvest food. 4. Sussex pond pudding. After all that pastry and meat, this is the sweet one that shocks people. A pudding basin gets lined with suet pastry. Then you drop in butter and sugar with a lemon, often a whole one in modern versions, and seal it up tight. It then sits over simmering water for hours until the citrus softens and the butter sugar turns into a thick, glossy sauce. That's the pond. Slice it open and the lemony syrup rushes out and pools around the pudding. The earliest printed record is in Hannah Woolley's 1672 The Queen-like Closet. 5. Oxford sausages. Right. Swap the pudding basin for a frying pan. Oxford sausages are the ones that smell almost unexpectedly fresh. Pork and veal mixed with beef sweet, breadcrumbs, sage and savoury herbs, then lifted with lemon rind and a bit of nutmeg. That exact lemon rind plus sage fingerprint shows up in Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management in the 1860s. They're older than that though. References to an Oxford-style sausage go back to the early 1700s, including John Knott's 1723 cookbook. And because the mix is fine and well seasoned, they don't need hiding under gallons of sauce. 6. Collops, and if sausages are the mixed and seasoned version, collops are the no-nonsense shortcut. You slice the meat thin, get a pan hot, and it's basically cooked by the time you've turned it. In older English usage, collops could mean rashers of bacon, and the classic plate is bacon collops with eggs. Simple, salty, filling. There's even a calendar link. The Monday before Shrove Tuesday was known as Collop Monday, tied to using up meat before Lent, with bacon and egg breakfasts mentioned in older food writing. 7. Rumble-de-thumps, English border version. Once the meat's out of the picture, this is what the table falls back on. Potatoes get mashed, cabbage gets softened, and then you fold the two together with plenty of butter until it turns into one big comforting mound. In the Scottish borders, it's known as rumble-de-thumps, and the basic trio is potatoes, cabbage, and often onion. Some versions finish it under heat with a cheese topping, which pushes it from side dish into something you can eat as a meal. It's regularly compared to Irish colcannon and England's bubble and squeak. 8. Deviled kidneys. And then you swing the other way, straight into the old breakfast offal that never messed about. Kidneys go in fast because overcooked, they turn rubbery. The deviled part is the punchy coating. English mustard, cayenne, butter and Worcestershire sauce, stirred into a glossy, spicy glaze. It's strongly tied to Victorian Britain as a breakfast dish often served on toast, and deviling more broadly is that British habit of making something hot with mustard and cayenne rather than modern chili sauces. Hot, sharp, rich, done. 9. Sheep's head broth. If kidneys were the quick offal, this is the patient, everything gets used version. A sheep's head broth starts with the least glamorous bit of the animal and turns it into something warming and practical. There are old British references to sheep's head broth in cookery writing, including mentions that Queen Victoria's chef, Charles Elme Francatelli, served it. Up north, a closely related idea shows up as pau saudi, a sheep's head broth associated with Scotland. The method is simple: long simmering, careful skimming, then you pick any usable meat and let the stock do the heavy lifting. 10. Beef olive. That same use what you've got mindset shows up in a very tidy little beef roll. Beef olives are thin slices of beef spread out, stuffed, often with forcemeat or sausage meat, then rolled and tied before they're braised in stock or gravy until tender. And despite the name, they don't need actual olives at all. The olive is the shape, a small tied parcel. Mrs. Beeton prints them as beef rolls or olives, which tells you how normal the term once was. String off, cut one open, and the stuffing sits in tight spirals inside the beef. 11. Panacalty. If beef olive was the rolled-up Sunday dinner, panacalty was the use what you've got version. You slice potatoes, soften onions, then build it in layers with whatever meat is to hand. Often corned beef, but sometimes bacon or lamb, before adding stock and letting the oven do the heavy lifting. It's strongly tied to northeast England, especially around Sunderland and County Durham, and the spelling shifts depending on who's writing it down. Panacalty, panacalty, panaculty, even panacity. 12. Peas pudding. And sitting right next to meals like that, you'd often find something even simpler. A pot on the hob, peas breaking down as they bubble away, the whole thing turning from soup to paste if you keep going. That's peas pudding. Split peas simmered until they soften, then mashed into a thick, buttery mound. It's not meant to be fancy, it's meant to be steady. Traditionally, it turns up alongside boiled meats, especially ham, because it soaks up the salty liquor and makes the plate feel complete. Done right, it's smooth enough to spread, but still hearty enough to hold its shape on the fork. 13th. Soused mackerel. That same mindset, making food hold for longer, shows up at the coast too. Fresh mackerel doesn't hang around, so people turn to sousing. Cooked fish cooled, packed and covered in spiced vinegar. The vinegar does two jobs at once. It sharpens the flavor and it helps slow spoilage, exactly the kind of workaround you lean on before fridges are normal. Bay, peppercorns, maybe a bit of mace or cloves if you've got them, then the fish sits and takes on that tang. It's not pickled for fun. It's a way to land a catch and still have something safe and lively to eat a day or two later. 14. Mock goose. And once shortages hit, people got even more inventive. A baking dish goes down, and instead of meat, it's thin potato slices layered with cooking apple, a dusting of dried sage, and a bit of grated cheese. Stock gets poured in, and the whole thing bakes until it holds together like a proper dinner. Wartime recipe leaflets even labeled this mock goose, not because it fooled anyone perfectly, but because sage and apple is the same flavor cue people associated with roast goose. Comfort food by misdirection. 15. Bubble and squeak, original form. And once a roast had happened, nothing from it was meant to sit around. You'd hear it first, cabbage hitting hot fat, then little pops as chopped beef joins in. The original bubble and squeak wasn't a smooth potato cake. It was yesterday's boiled cabbage, shredded, mixed through with leftover beef, and fried until the edges browned and the pan started talking. That name isn't poetic, it's basically an audio description. Potatoes often turned up later because they padded it out, but the early idea was meat and greens, reheated the best way possible. A Monday dinner built from Sunday's remains, and still proudly named after the noise it made. 16. Savory duck. And if leftovers were one trick, the butcher's counter had another, savory duck, which, despite the name, isn't duck at all. In parts of northern England, ducks could mean faggots, minced offcuts and offal mixed with herbs, often with breadcrumbs, then shaped into small rounds and cooked hot, usually with gravy. It's the kind of food that turns scraps into something proper and filling without pretending it's fancy. The nickname ducks shows up in print by the 1840s, with savoury ducks used as a regional name. 17. Watercress soup, traditional rural version. But not every forgotten dish came from the butcher. Sometimes it was the nearest clean spring. Watercress grows in cool, running water, so in rural areas, it wasn't a market ingredient at all. It was something you could actually go and pick. The old version of watercress soup stays simple. Soften onion, add potato for body, then let the watercress hit the pot right near the end so it keeps its peppery edge instead of turning dull. Blend it or mash it rough if that's the kitchen you've got. Either way, it's green, sharp, and warming in about 1 saucepan. 18. Bath chaps. And if that last one feels light, this next one swings the other way. Bath chaps are basically the pig's cheek and jaw, cured, then boiled until the meat turns tender and sliceable. It's the sort of thing you'd see at a butcher's counter and do a double take at. Not pretty, but very deliberate. Cheek meat has loads of flavor, and curing firms it up so it holds together instead of falling apart. People ate it hot or let it cool and cut it like cold meat. Either way, it's pure West Country use the whole animal thinking, with a name that still points straight back to Bath. 19. Hasty pudding. After all that cured pork, this one goes straight back to the hearth. Someone's got a pot on, and they're tipping in flour or oatmeal a little at a time, stirring like mad so it doesn't clump. That's hasty pudding, not fancy pudding, more like a fast-filling thick porridge that could be on the table quickly. The toppings did the talking. A knob of butter melting into it, or treacle poured over the top, turned plain grain into something comforting. It's the kind of dish that doesn't need a recipe card, just a spoon, a pan, and something sweet to finish it off. 20. Pork fruit. And from that plain pot, some tables went completely the other way. Cold pork turned into a party trick. Cooked meat could be pressed into molds, set firm, then coated in a clear glaze like aspic, so it looked glossy and finished. Early modern dining culture genuinely loved illusion and display, dishes designed to surprise, not just feed. So, pork fruit sits in that tradition, shaping and coloring food to resemble something else, then presenting it cold as a centerpiece. The exact label varies by source, but the idea, edible deception, was real. 21. Scotch woodcock, English Victorian version. And if pork could be dressed up as fruit, names could be just as misleading. Scotch woodcock sounds like game from a country house, but the Victorian version was a quick supper, toast, anchovy paste, and softly scrambled eggs piled on top. The anchovy isn't a garnish either. It's the salty backbone, melting into the hot bread so the eggs taste richer than they have any right to. It's also a reminder that Victorian food wasn't only roasts and puddings. Sometimes it was just pantry staples, done smart, with a cheeky name that promises a bird and delivers toast. 22. Lent pie. And if you think the Victorians could get mileage out of eggs on toast, Lent pushed that idea even further. In parts of Kent, especially around Folkestone, there was a thing called Kent Lent pie, also known as Folkestone pudding pie. It's basically a cheesecake-ish filling in pastry, eggs beaten with milk and butter, brightened with lemon, sweetened with sugar, then dotted with currants, and warmed through with nutmeg. No meat, but still rich enough to feel like you weren't being punished for observing Lent. 23. Brown Windsor soup, original version. Once those meatless weeks ended, you could swing hard the other way. Brown Windsor soup is famous now as a joke, that gloomy brown hotel bowl. But the original version people picture isn't a neat, standard Victorian recipe with one agreed formula. Food historians point out the name is slippery, and the stereotype seems to solidify much later than the supposed royal origins. What is real is the style it's often trying to gesture at. A proper meat stock built from bones and trimmings, simmered with vegetables, then darkened and thickened into something filling. And yes, earlier Windsor soups show up in old cookery books, just not as that cartoon. 24. Dripping cake. After a pot like that, you didn't waste what rose to the top. Once the roasting tin cooled, the dripping set into a pale, firm layer, and that's where dripping cake comes in. Same basic idea as any old-fashioned sponge or loaf, just swapping butter for beef fat. It sounds odd, until you remember dripping behaves like any solid cooking fat. It shortens the crumb, helps it hold moisture, and gives a deeper, savory edge even when the cake leans sweet. It's thrift baking, basically. Not fancy, just practical and surprisingly good once it hits a hot oven. 25. Seed cake. A long table, strong tea, and a plain sponge that smells oddly herbal before it even gets sliced. That's seed cake. The seed is usually caraway, folded through the batter so every bite has that warm, slightly peppery note. It turns up again and again in older British baking because caraway was a familiar flavoring, not some fancy curveball. Serve it at rural get-togethers, fairs, harvest time, anything where you needed something sturdy, sliceable, and not too sweet. No icing, no fuss, just that caraway hit that tells you this isn't a modern Victoria sponge.